Hello dear viewers, support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it, and also make sure you comment your thought. Now let's start the video. Robb accepting. I'm surprised to find you here, Robb said quietly, surprising his brother. Jon was leaning against a tree at the edge of the clearing, watching the two dragons sleep. Even asleep, they were still fearsome-looking beasts. And unlike their dead brother, they weren't covered in spears and arrows. There wasn't much Robb could do to contain the creatures, but he had placed the Raventry Hall archers around the Godswood, all armed with the best arrows that could be found, and war horns in case the dragons became a problem. I had to come, Jon replied in the same quiet tone. You saw what they did during the battle. You're not talking about their fiery breath, I take it, Robb said, leaning against a tree next to his brother. You're talking about when Rhaegal refused to fly where you were. Jon could only nod. Did I ever tell you what Rhaegal did when it first saw me? Robb asked. It walked right up to me and sniffed me. It seemed extremely curious and then turned its back on me, like I was nothing. Strange, Jon said, glancing at his brother. Is it? Robb asked curiously. You know Rhaegal doesn't have a rider. Perhaps he was looking for one. What are you getting at, Robb? Jon said. You know exactly what I'm getting at, Robb replied. Jon, I know you're a Stark now, but this, he gestured to the sleeping dragons, is your birthright just as much as Ghost is. You want me to ride one of them? Jon asked, annoyed. I want nothing to do with them. Then why are you here? Robb asked simply. Jon didn't answer, just scowled and went back to his brooding. Robb rolled his eyes and ran a hand through his hair. When Jon had explained his actual history, Robb had been more than happy that he had chosen to just accept his Stark side. But when Robb looked at the dragons, he couldn't help but feel like Jon was meant to be a Targaryen. Robb also knew that Jon was meant to be great, regardless of his last name. Rhaegal was named after Rhaegar, your birth father, Robb said gently. It's destiny, Jon. Rhaegar thought it was his destiny to fulfill a prophecy, and instead destroyed his house. Jon countered. Fine, Robb said, giving up. Have you spoken to the girl? Jon shook his head. I'd been tempted, but what's the point? She might just see it as a ploy to have her dragons taken from her. No, I gave her dragons back to her. She knows that, Robb said. Then again, the only reason I did that was because I know that there's a connection between you and Rhaegal. I noticed it during the battle, and now the fact that he sniffed me when he met me makes sense. So I'm your dragon deterrent, Jon grumbled. Great. Robb shrugged, knowing that his brother was just annoyed that Robb had suggested that being a Targaryen and riding a dragon was his destiny. He would get over it, eventually. Jon and Robb were too close for something like this to get between them. What do you plan to do now? Robb asked curiously. I'm sure Father could easily find you a holdfast in the north. Hells, you can virtually ask any Lord Paramount for a castle and a wife, and you'll get it. Jon shook his head. I'm not sure yet. I want to go back north, but I don't want to leave you alone in this viper pit. Why don't you compromise? Robb said. It'll take some time for Father to find and fix a castle for you in the north. So stay here with me for a year. And do what? Jon asked. Just live, Jon, Robb said with a smile. You're welcome to attend council meetings, take a squire, go hunt, whatever you want to do. Of course I will call on you for advice every now and then. I need someone who calls me Robb, not your grace. Besides Marguerite, then he added, and Sam will be here. As the Grand Maester, I assume, Jon said, knowing that Robb had a generous gift lined up for the son of Randyll Tarly. Naturally, Robb replied. Jon, whatever you want to do, you can do it. You will always have my full support. Will you force me to take a wife? Jon asked curiously. Robb laughed. Gods no, not unless you feel like finding a girl to settle down with. I'm sure Marguerite would love to find you a match. Jon shook his head quickly. I'm not ready, he said immediately. I'll think about it, Robb. Thank you. Robb smiled and clapped his brother on the shoulder. We're brothers, Jon, he said, glancing at the dragons. You helped me get here. Wherever you want to go, say the word and you'll have all you need. You may not want to ride a dragon, but you're destined for greatness. But you're a king, Jon pointed out. I am. Robb agreed. But you are the son of a wolf and a dragon, raised by an honorable man with a loving family. That to me sounds like the foundation for greatness. On Einbreak? Silence for the king. Leopold, Robb's new steward, shouted as the double doors of the throne room opened for Robb and Margaery. The massive room was filled to the brim with men and women, all of whom were dressed in their very best. Robb and Margaery were no exception. The Northern King wore a black velvet doublet with a silver direwolf on his left breast. Along with his black breeches and finely polished leather boots, he looked every inch a Northman. His bronze and black iron crown brought the whole outfit together. Margaery was a true vision in her silk and lace dress of deep blue and golden roses. She also wore a sheer white cloak that was clasped to her shoulders with two direwolves, exactly how Robb's cloak was. Instead of having her hair piled atop her head in ornate braids, she instead settled for allowing her hair to flow naturally down her back and shoulders. Greywind, with his coat smooth and shining, padded in front of the royal couple and took the steps up to the throne, a couple at a time until he eventually took a seat on the left-hand side of the throne. Robb and Margaery strode into the hall, all while being bombarded with cheers and thunderous applause. The vastness of the room allowed the sound to be amplified, so although there were only 1,000 people present, it sounded like 10,000. Robb could only smile and nod to those he recognized, with Margaery waving at his side. For the first time, Robb realized why Sansa loved stories of knights and princesses. This felt exactly like a fairy tale. Robb helped Margaery up the steps and into an uncomfortable, ornate wooden throne that was placed on the right hand of the Iron Throne before Robb took a seat on the iron monstrosity, the cheering and applause somehow becoming louder once he did that. Robb took a second to look around the room, a small smile on his face. His and Marcus' family were in the very front, with the Towrells on his left and his family on his right. Robb's closest and most ardent supporters were right behind them. Randyll Tarly, Bryce Caron, Gregor Forrester, and his family, Harold Arryn and Jon Royce, all were grinning wildly and clapping. The King of Westeros raised his hand and silence soon came. He stood up, resting one hand on his sword. "Thank you, all of you." Robb started, pleased that his voice carried throughout the entire room. "It has been a hard year. We have all suffered and fought through adversity, but we stand here now, victorious." The cheering and applause started again in earnest, as Robb allowed a brilliant smile on his face. He could see tears appearing in the eyes of some. The war had taken a toll on them all, but those who had lived through it were now emerging into the light after walking on the long, dark road of war. He raised a hand again, waiting for silence. When it came, he continued to speak. "I would be remiss if I did not first honor the dead," Robb said mournfully. "It is my hope that, wherever they were, they are smiling and rejoicing like we are here. Their sacrifice was not in vain, and I swear here and now that I will do all I can to honor their deaths by building a world that they would be proud and happy to live in." There was only clapping to this announcement, but many in the crowd now had actual tears sliding down their cheeks, their throats caught with emotion of all they had lost. Robb waited a few more moments for the mood to settle before transitioning into the next part of his speech. "I will spend the rest of my life honoring the dead, but I must also honor those who have been invaluable in the fight against tyranny and evil," Robb said. "First and foremost, my brother Jon Stark." The audience cheered as Jon, dressed in a fine black leather jerkin and a silk white shirt, made his way to the steps leading up the throne and knelt. Robb descended the steps and helped him back to his feet, both brothers sharing a private smile before Robb addressed the crowd. "Jon traveled across the entire North to be by my side. That is unparalleled loyalty," Robb said proudly, not to be outdone by his own accomplishments. "When the traitor Roose Bolton threatened our family, Jon took the men of the North and retook our homeland." Robb clapped his brother on the shoulder. "Is there any way that I can repay you for all that you have done?" Jon shook his head. "Your Grace, all I wish is to continue to serve you to the best of my ability," he said with a bow, before adding, "We are family. There is no need to repay what is expected." Robb grinned as his brother straightened up. The two men embraced warmly before Jon stepped back, bowed and returned to his spot next to Sansa. It made Robb immensely proud to see Jon standing with the rest of his family instead of being forced to stand behind them. The king continued to call forward commanders and knights, thanking them all personally. Garolan, Lord Caron, Tartarly, Ser Durden, Lord Blackwood, Lord Mallister, Ser Donal Swan, Gregor Forrester, and many others. Finally, there was one more man whom Robb had to call forward. "Father," Robb said softly, his voice still managing to carry. Eddard Stark strode forward and stood before Robb, father and son gazing at each other for a moment before the older man knelt before Robb. The two Starks had already discussed and agreed on Robb wearing the crown and being king, while Eddard would return to Winterfell and rule the north. Now Eddard was making it official in front of everyone just by kneeling. Jon said it best, father said, standing up. There is no need to repay what is expected of family. Westeros is at peace and has a great king. He looked up at Margaery. Aye, and a great queen as well. Robb could only smile, knowing full well that there was virtually nothing that he could say that could follow his father's words. The great king was raised by a greater man, Robb said before embracing his father. The room cheered at the sight of father and son embracing. Eddard Stark was respected, if not beloved, by all present, and both Robb and Jon were clearly on the same path. In the war, both had forged names for themselves that would be remembered for all time. The young wolf, the northern king who had united most of Westeros and fought against corrupt lions and dragons, and the white wolf, his brother who freed the north and was destined for greatness. As Robb's father returned to his wife, who had tears staining her cheeks, Robb returned to his spot in front of the throne. Already, the throne room was quiet, waiting expectantly for whatever he had to say next. As fearsome as Grey Wind is, Robb said, I have need of 7 swords to protect both myself and my family. As I call your name, come forward. Saro Loras, Torel, Saro Bellen Swan, Saro Loren, Storen, Saro Bar Royce, Saro Garth Hightower, Saro Bar Red Wine, and Brienne of Tarth. The audience stopped just short of applauding as the final warrior strode forward, her back straight and her head held high as she took her place next to the men that she had fought beside for months. There was a little chatter, but those who were close to Robb knew that Brienne was a logical choice for the White Cloak. You 7 and others have protected me on the battlefield and off it, Robb said, ignoring the chatter. You would honor me if you were to take up the White Cloak. It would be an honor, my lord, Brienne said, dropping to a knee. Immediately the other 6 followed her example and knelt before Robb, pledging their lives to him. I swear on my honor that I will never ask you to break your knightly vows, Robb said, surprising the audience. Protecting the innocent, standing up to evil, fighting against villainy, these are the standards of great warriors, and that is exactly what you all are. I promise that I will never force you to break those standards. Robb waited for the crowd to stop clapping before adding, Brienne of Tarth, step forward. The woman known as Brienne the Beauty stepped forward, her hands behind her back. Robb couldn't help but smile. It was time for the unofficial captain of his guard to become the official commander of the most elite fighting force in Westeros. There are few who have served me as well as you, Brienne, he said proudly. It is my honor to name you commander of my Kingsguard. The room went silent for a second, before that was broken by the sound of clapping. Robb Royce got to his feet, still clapping loudly. Thalin Swan and Roland Storm soon joined him. Then Loras, Hobber, and Garth were clapping as well. Others around the room who had fought in Robb's battle guard began to clap as well. Then, like a dam breaking, the room broke into thunderous applause with cheers and calls of congratulations, adding to the noise. Brienne dropped her head, but Robb still saw her quickly wipe away tears. The king grinned and held up a hand for silence. Today you will be measured for your cloaks and armor. Tonight you will sleep in the White Sword Tower, and tomorrow you will take up your duty. The 7 warriors all nodded and bowed before leaving, receiving cheers until they were all gone from the room. A great king must have a great council, Robb said. Samwell Tarly, Lady Anya Waynwood, Lord Jason Mallister, Lord Jon Royce, Alec Reed, Lord Randall Tarly, please step forward. When all 6 people were in front of Robb, they followed the example of the 7 warriors and knelt before him. The king easily named them to their respective positions. Lady Anya, I name you Mistress of Coin. Lord Jason, I name you Master of Ships. Lord Royce, I name you Master of Laws. Master Reed, I name you Master of Whispers. Master Samwell, although you have yet to be named a full Maester, a title I believe you will earn soon, I still name you Grand Maester, Robb said. Lord Tarly, you will be the first to take up a new position on the council. I name you Master of War. The 6 new council members bowed their heads and returned to their spots, all while being congratulated by their friends and family. Tyrion Lannister, step forward, Robb called, immediately making the room go silent. The man known as the Imp waddled forward, with an amused smile on his face. He knelt before Robb. The king took a moment to gaze at the man before approaching him, stopping in front of him in the same way he did with Jon. "Let it be known here that I owe Tyrion Lannister my life," Robb said in a loud and clear voice. "Without his help, Samwell would not have been able to save me, after being stabbed with a poisonous dagger. Without his help, there's a likely chance that I would have been burned alive by dragon fire." Willis would have gotten to the same conclusion. Tyrion muttered loud enough for only Robb to hear, still kneeling with his head bowed, still surprised he's Mace Tyrell's son. Robb resisted the urge to smile. "True, our families have been at war, but I am happy to say that the war between the Lancetors and the Starks is over." The crowd cheered, but it was subdued as they were curious to see where Robb was going. It was clear that they sensed that something more was going to happen. But Robb knew that none of them, save for a select few, knew what was about to be announced. "For the good you did for my family, and for saving my life twice, I name you Hand of the King," Robb said. "Stand recognized, Lord Tyrion." The imp stood, and glanced at Robb before turning around. Like with Brienne's appointment to commander of the Kingsguard, there wasn't immediate celebration. Sansa fixed that, swiftly followed by Jon and Willis. Then the whole room applauded. It was still subdued as everyone was still surprised by the announcement. Tyrion made a show of bowing to both the Starks and Tyrells before retaking his place behind Willis, next to his squire and the new Lord of Clegane's Keep. As Robb took his seat on the Iron Throne, his steward named out the Lord Paramounts and Wardens. There was also a clear difference in the titles, as men like Robb's father, or Harold Arryn, were not referred to as Warden of the North or Warden of the East, but instead Warden of the North and Warden of the Vale. It never made sense to Robb why only a few men had the title of Warden. With Robb's and Margaery's new system of government, there would be both a Warden and a Lord Paramount for every region except for Dorne and the Crownlands. After the Lords Paramounts and Wardens had been named, the Blackfish, Garlan, Yohn Royce, and Sardonal Swan stepped forward, knighting hundreds of squires who had earned the honor. The ceremony lasted a good 2 hours, in which time some of the audience left for whatever reason before returning later. Finally, after the last man was knighted, the 4 warriors turned and bowed to Robb before returning to their spots. The new king of Westeros stood up, instantly gaining the attention of the audience. "Westeros is finally at peace," Robb said proudly, "but our great land has been wounded and scarred. With good and wise men and women by my side, I mean to heal the realm and bring about an era of prosperity. I meant what I said. I will build a world that the dead would be proud to live in, this I swear." With Robb's final announcement made, he held out a hand for Margaery, who took it easily as the two began to descend the steps and walk down the aisle. Once again, they were surrounded by cheering. When the royal couple was past the doors and walking towards their rooms to chance for the feast, followed by 2 northern warriors, Robb grinned at his wife. "Not a bad start," he chuckled. Margaery kissed him on his cheek. "It's only the beginning." Daenerys fought. Her quarters were everything anyone would want them to be. Far better accommodations than the Black Cells. It seems Robb Stark was a very different man than most. The young ex-queen had met in her life. Most would have thrown her and the last of her advisors in dungeons like they were nothing better than thugs. The young wolf had the remainder of the Daenerys advisors put in solitary rooms, confined to different corners of the Red Keep. The young queen should have been livid by Robb Stark's action, being so close to the signing of the treaty. But in all actuality, after the revelation revealed to her by Varys, all she felt was numb. One of her men went behind her back and tried to have Stark and her child killed. The similarities between the assassination plot and the deaths of Ilya Martell and her child made Daenerys' stomach churn. Connington had become Tywin Lannister, and never realized it. Daenerys was still also stunned by her conversation with Robb. Not only was he naming her Lady of Dragonstone, but he was also giving her back her dragons and her Unsullied. It was an act of mercy that was beyond anything Daenerys had ever witnessed. He had every right to throw her in a cell and let her rot, or even kill her. But he didn't. Robb was being merciful, and because of his mercy, Daenerys knew that anything she did to regain her crown would set her up as a villain. She knew that she could do nothing to retaliate against Robb, because he had given Daenerys her life back. It also didn't help that Daenerys would also risk the lives of her dragons and remaining unsullied if she tried to fight a man with the might of Westeros at his back. A knock on the door took her out of her thoughts. So far the ex-queen had been left alone, except for a random rotation of servants bringing her meals. She had just finished her meager meal of ham, bread, and fruit, so there was no reason for anyone else to see her. "Come," she called. The door opened to reveal a tall, broad-shouldered man. He was dressed in the plaited leather that all Northmen seemed to wear. He had long, dark hair and deep gray eyes. He was an older man, probably in his 40s, but he was obviously a warrior. In some sense, she reminded her of Robb Stark, with the same quiet authority and mysterious power. The man nodded to her. "You must be Daenerys Targaryen," he said, closing the door behind him. Daenerys nodded. "Who are you, sir?" The man lowered himself into a nearby chair. "Me? I'm just a man," he answered quietly. "But some refer to me as Lord Stark." Realization dawned on the young woman. Sitting in front of her was Eddard Stark, the last remaining figurehead of the rebellion that ended the Targaryen dynasty. She sat up a little straighter. "I must admit, Lord Stark, I did not expect you," she said, keeping her voice neutral. The older man nodded, leaning forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "And I did not expect to seek you out," he admitted. "But I spoke to Ser Barristan this morning, and he mentioned how you had spoken to him and Mormont about the rebellion. Something you had a hand in," Daenerys snapped, unable to help herself. Eddard gazed at her in annoyance. "Do not be so quick to place blame on me, girl. Your family is not free of guilt," he said firmly. "I assume you came here for a reason, my lord. Say it or be gone," Daenerys grumbled, glaring at the Lord of Winterfell. "You want to know about the rebellion, about your brother, the Bard Prince," Lord Stark said. "I was there in my sister's final moments. I know the truth." "If you know the truth, then why didn't you share it with your friend, the usurper?" Daenerys challenged. Eddard hesitated before explaining. "If I had, then it would have put the people I love at risk," he said vaguely. "But you want to know about Rhaegar and what happened with my sister?" "I do," Daenerys answered reluctantly. The two met at the tournament of Harrenhal. Lord Stark started. By this time Lyanna was betrothed to Robert, and Rhaegar was married. "I've spoken with my brother and others who were there who knew my sister. None of us were aware of the relationship or even how it started. But that was the only event that could have brought the two together." He sighed. "When Rhaegar presented her with that bloody crown, all the smiles died. I knew that there would be many rumors spreading across the north and Westeros about what happened, but none could have imagined the carnage that happened because of that very moment." Daenerys nodded. "Ser Barristan said as much." She explained. "The question neither he nor Ser Jorah were able to answer was why. Why did a married man take a woman betrothed to another? There was a rumor spreading from the capital that the Bard Prince was obsessed with prophecy, and someone called the prince that was promised," he explained. "Speaking with one of my bannermen, he said that the prophecy spoke about a warrior that would rise up and save the world from a great evil." Daenerys frowned. She remembered hearing that phrase during her time in the House of the Undying in court. She had a vision of her brother Rhaegar, talking about how his son Aegon was the prince that was promised. "The Song of Ice and Fire," Daenerys muttered. Lord Stark nodded. "Aye, that's the name of the prophecy." Rhaegar thought he had it figured out. The problem was that Elia Martell nearly died giving birth to the boy, Aegon. He needed a new woman, he thought. My sister was the one he needed. Ice and fire. Daenerys's head was spinning as she tried to wrap her mind around the story. "So my brother took your sister to fulfill a prophecy." Eddard nodded slightly. For her part, Lyanna probably saw it as a way to free herself from her marriage to Robert, he said quietly. "I knew my sister well enough, and she was always a free spirit. What was going through her mind when the Bard Prince came calling, no one knows. But she wasn't abducted, that much was certain." From there they went to the Tower of Joy, Daenerys said, continuing the story. "How did you find her?" Eddard smiled grimly. "Varys," he said. "The spider told me where Rhaegar had kept her and who was with her. I took my Northmen south, to Storm's End to break the Tyrell siege, before I journeyed to Dorne with 6 companions at my side. There we found the 3 Kingsguard, Ser Oswell Wend, Lord Commander Hightower, and Ser Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning. For the first time during their entire conversation, Lord Stark looked far older than his years. His dark eyes had a far-off look in them, as he remembered that deadly battle in the shadow of the Cursed Tower. Many of my friends died, and I would have as well if not for Howland. Arthur Dayne continues to be the most dangerous man I've ever fought. And your sister? Lord Stark's face hardened as the ex-queen brought up the girl. I found my sister laying in a pool of blood, he said heavily. She only had moments to live. He turned to look at Daenerys, his eyes gazing steadily into her indigo ones. For the first time since the man had entered, did Daenerys feel real fear. Lord Connington and Aegon saw Eddard Stark like they saw Jon Arryn, Hoster Tully and Robert Baratheon. Just another rebel. But this was the man who had fought one of the greatest swordsmen in the last half-century, and lived. He was a very dangerous man. When Lyanna learned of our father and brother's murder at the hands of the Mad King, she wanted to leave and go home. Rhaegar was at the point of no return. He was so obsessed with making the prophecy come to life that he ordered his Kingsguard to hold her down while he raped her. He got her with child and went north to fight Robert, where he was slaughtered on the Trident, he explained bitterly. My sister told me that she fought back, but 3 men against 1, she never had a chance. The only man who retained his honor was Arthur Dayne, who wasn't present when it happened. Daenerys looked away, unable to meet his gaze. Although she hadn't even been born when her family had committed the crimes, the weight of them still fell on her shoulders. She was still a Targaryen, and as such felt the full effects of the sins of her family. Her brother, the rapist. Her father, the murderer. Her brother threatening to carve out her child seemed like the least of the crimes of her family. It took a moment for the young queen to speak again, trying to hold back tears as her brother's actions were revealed to her. What happened to the child? She asked finally. They are living a life far away from that blasted monstrosity of a chair, Eddard said, getting to his feet. They were raised not knowing their actual parents for their own protection.
You never raised a child?
Daenerys asked, shocked. Eddard frowned. I did more for that child than you could possibly comprehend, he growled. I kept them a secret from my best friend, my king, because I worried that he would kill the child. I protected them and honored my sister's memory. Daenerys recoiled at the anger in the man's voice. During the conversation, Lord Stark's tone had been conversational, although a little angry and mournful at times. But as the two spoke more and more about what happened to Lyanna Stark and the events in Dorne, his voice became harsh, full of sadness and bitterness. Here was a man who lost most of his family and was then forced to protect his sister's child from his best friend. That amount of stress and heartbreak would make weaker men broken shells of themselves. I am sorry for what my family has done to yours, Daenerys said quietly. I know nothing I say or do can ever make that right. The Lord of Winterfell regarded the girl before him, before finally nodding, accepting her apology. If what Robb tells me is true, then you are one of the better Targaryens, he said. Hence, why he's given you back your men, dragons, and home. He took a risk by doing so. You better prove him right. Thank you for speaking with me, my lord. Daenerys said gently, ready to be done with this conversation. Eddard nodded. You deserve to know the truth. He stood up and walked towards the door, stopping just before opening it. My son is not someone to be messed with. I understand whatever you may feel. But I urge you to think of Westeros. I urge you to be better than your brothers and father. And with that, the Lord of Winterfell slipped out and left Daenerys alone. Line break. Bran. The castle was made entirely of ice, and even in the frozen wasteland of the lands of always winter, he could feel cold and evil radiating from the place. The man next to the broken wolf shuffled. What is this place? Bran asked. There is no name for it, at least not one suitable to describe. It's darkness. The three-eyed crow explained grimly, but it is what created these lands. When the great darkness rose once more and created its creatures of ice and shadow, it raised this castle and cast winter across half of Westeros. But it's summer in the south, Bran pointed out. The further you are from evil, the weaker its power becomes. The Green Seer answered, looking around. We cannot stay long, or they will sense our presence. Bran opened his eyes and was back in the cave, sitting across from the man in the tree, with his useless legs. Just as the crow had promised, he was learning how to fly, and while he was taking in all he could, there was still so much more he needed to learn. Why did you show me that? Bran asked. Because you need to know where the enemy draws its power, the Green Seer said. However, that power cannot be drawn if there is nothing to draw it. Rain frowned. What do you mean? A sword cannot be drawn if there is no one to wield it, a light, musical voice explained from above. Bran. The second son of Eddard Stark finally realized what he was being told. The powers of the Wek, of the enemy, they cannot be used if there is no longer any of the enemy left. That is correct, the seer said. Your ancestor was not able to kill the last of the great enemy in the battle for the dawn. You must not make the same mistake. Bran sat up a little straighter, using his hands. How can I make sure that they are all destroyed? The seer shook his head. There is still so much for you to learn. He glanced at the prone form of Bran's uncle Benjen. The first ranger of the Night's Watch had been unconscious for almost weeks since Mira and their new allies had found him half dead with arrows buried in his back. The last green seer looked back at Bran. The long night comes upon us, and we must all play our part if the living want to win.